Hi, thank you all so much. Really appreciate you sticking with us. I know we're all ready for lunch, especially as East Coasters. This is getting a little late, so hopefully we can keep your stomachs at bay and have a great discussion as we go through. My name is Jenna Tuttle. I'm head of product for Zego, and I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves, starting with my right here with Jennifer.
Great. Hi, everybody. Jennifer Staciokas. I'm the president of Western Wealth Communities. We are an owner-operator based out of Vancouver, British Columbia, and our management company is based in Phoenix. We have about 6,000 units in Arizona, Texas, and Nevada.
My name is Dustin Crandall. I am the Director of Sales and Customer Experience at Ventura Realty. We're owner-operator out of Houston. We have about 27,000 units. Conventional, we started in the last 5 years developing our own communities as well. So happy to be here. Hopefully we get you out of here for lunch quickly.
Hi, Kyle Nelson, Executive Vice President at Snapped. Snapped is AI-powered fraud detection applicant trust platform. We service 2.3 million units across the United States, including several of the fine folks on the stage. Happy to be here.
Amy Davis with BH Management. We are owner-operator of 95,000 units across multifamily and BTR assets.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So I don't know if you guys have kept up with a lot of your reading lately, but both NAA as well as several other publications have really talked a lot lately about how fraud has increased. So quick show of hands, I promise we will not judge you. How many of you have experienced fraud in the last year, either through the application or the payment process? All right, well, you're not alone. According to NAA in their latest survey, 41% of their respondents had experienced fraud that was significant and had a significant impact on their overall revenue. In fact, they also say that a one bad lease can cost a company approximately $100,000 in costs. So it's really a big problem, and it's one that continues to grow as AI technology gets more sophisticated and the bad actors have more opportunity to introduce fraud into the system. So let's talk a little bit more about how fraud and the landscape has really evolved over the past year. How has the fraud landscape evolved, and what risks are we having, are having the most material impact on asset performance today? Amy?
Yeah, we've seen quite a bit of change pretty drastically since kind of simple fraud early on, modifying pay stubs using like Photoshop, to this fraud as a service where people are selling the fraud. Excuse me. It has been quite impactful to our business. So we centralized our screening services. So we took what we were screening across 300 properties. Mm-hmm. We centralized it to about 20 people processing. We are now able to see trends very quickly. We've partnered with a vendor partner, not necessarily this one, but a vendor partner.
Yet.
And we are able to identify the fraud and really start to make moves and be adaptable to the changes that we're seeing in the industry, because it's happening so fast these days.
It is. It really is happening fast. And Jennifer, I know you had a lot to say about this when we talked earlier.
Yes, absolutely. And I've spoken to many of our supplier partners out in the audience, and the minute you think you have it solved, there's something else that you have to be thinking about. And so it's rapidly changing. So identity fraud, what we're seeing is a 30% year-over-year increase, and that includes complex fraud, which is pretty crazy to think about. Stolen identities, like Amy said, you can go on TikTok now and buy something on the dark web for $1. And they're tagging apartment communities specifically that aren't using fraud detection software and trying to drive traffic that way. We've made some changes, and all of our properties are using some form of fraud detection. And we find that at the beginning, you see a flutter of applications that are coming through. Once word gets out, and it quickly gets out, then it's like you see your volume going down, but you're seeing the quality of renter going up. Yeah. Another thing too to think about is in the landscape is that eviction laws are making rental fraud way more prevalent than credit card fraud. So credit card fraud you can detect quickly, where we can sometimes have somebody living in our apartments for 12 months until we're able to get them out with that type of fraud. So we're seeing that happen. the ID verification, it's creating that illusion of security, right? So we're scanning that ID and we think that we have detection taking place on site, and really it's just an illusion of what is happening. And when I spoke with one of our providers that we're utilizing, they're really digging deep on the phone number, because if you think about securing a phone number, it's tied to your social security number. And so I don't have 15 phone numbers or 100 phone numbers because I can't get access to them. And so really tying some of our fraud detection efforts on the phone number is going to produce better results.
That's awesome. And it really leads really well into our next question about what's separating the different organizations that are being proactive versus those that are being reactive. Dustin?
Yeah, I think, and it may be a little obvious, but I think reactive organizations treat fraud as a collections issue and not a revenue quality issue or a front end strategy more so. So I think when you're, escalating things only when it hits bad debt, I think you're too late. You're not being proactive. You're being reactive, right? So you really got to start at the front end and thinking about it from, a sales perspective. It's revenue quality, and it's a strategy that says, to Jennifer's point, that we want higher qualified people getting in. So we may see volume go down, but if we're seeing a higher quality applicant, then we're satisfied.
Yeah, for sure. So how are screening technologies like Snapped, like DocuVeris, and others really helping us to strengthen our fraud prevention tool capabilities? Kyle?
Yeah, I think as I look at this is a continuous game of cat and mouse, and you said it perfectly, right? It's proactive versus reactive, and there's a lot of providers out there, I think, that are reactive, not just in fraud detection, but they react to the changes of the market. And the ones that are best in class, Snapped or Elise AI or what have you, they're proactive. They're going out and they're looking at next gen tactics, leveraging the top LLM models and ingesting that into their platforms to be able to provide a solution that's able to stay one step ahead of that cat and mouse. So I think that's a real important distinction here in terms of like overall screening tactics and platforms that are in market.
That really ties back to something we were hearing in the general sessions earlier today, is picking a good horse, right? Yeah. Making sure that the vendors you're picking really have a strong vision of where they're going, what they want to accomplish, and that the technology that you're using is not reactive, but really proactive and building on top of that. Dustin, what have you seen in terms of technologies that are out there that are helping not only to prevent fraud, but also making the resident experience as frictionless as possible in that?
Yeah, that's such a huge piece. I think you don't just want stronger controls, right? You want invisible, smart controls, right? You don't want it to be, you want legitimate applicants to almost feel like it's frictionless. You don't want them to feel like it's burdened, and you don't want to tighten the controls too much. I think one of the strategies that's really important to ensure from a CX perspective is that you look at a playbook essentially, and I'm looking at Jacob because he's the playbook guy, but you think about playbooks and you don't create a broad strategy. I think you look at your portfolio and say, where do we have, more risk? Where are our properties or our markets that we have more risk, and we potentially implement tighter controls there? I think you have to be very dynamic in your approach when it comes to this, because if you just broad brush, across the organization, you may unintentionally impact markets or properties that don't actually have a problem. And so I think from that perspective, you do have to think very strategically. I think the tools, I think of the tools need to have real-time data integrations. I think of instant ID verification. You want to reduce friction, but also you want to catch the fraud. So I think it's a balance. And I think when you have this strategy live between sort of, I want CX, but I also want revenue quality, then you're going to land somewhere in the middle. Where it's a little bit of friction, but at the same time, it's easy for legitimate people. And last thing I want to say is one of the most important things is remove subjective sort of decision making from your on-site teams. Like eliminate the guesswork and make it system-based.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I was going to say, I think there's a such thing, and you speak to it there, healthy friction, right? And what we've seen at Snapped is applicants are actually expecting that. And if it doesn't have that element of healthy friction, it's a red flag with who's really living at this community. And I think your applicant base is starting to see that more and more, where they want to go through an open banking process or a connected payroll process or have their documents verified programmatically.
It's like a trust factor.
Exactly. And I think it's not just applicants trusting, the operators, it's applicants trusting operators, operators trusting applicants.
Right. It goes back to you're setting the reputation for the community gets set during on the tour, but also during the application process. I mean, Amy, how have you all implemented this type of fraud prevention, but still maintained that customer service aspect?
Yeah, we have some friction, right? They have to upload their documents. Really, when we looked at the big picture of what people were telling us, the feedback we were getting, it was visibility into where they're at in that process. Christy, our COO, she's been asking for the Domino's pizza tracker since the beginning of the days. Like, we want to know every step. And if they can see that, then maybe we don't have that friction of reaching out, needing to call somebody back. Brandy Daniel told me a story yesterday of when she worked in a big high-rise building and she had elevators, and she got complaints all the time because of how slow they were. They ended up installing the little tracker, the floor tracker. All of a sudden, those complaints stopped because they could see the speed of the elevator did not change.
Why did you have to mention Domino's right before lunch?
I know, I'm so sorry.
Come on, Amy.
Yeah.
All right. Jennifer, how have you all implemented and kind of prevented fraud, but at the same time made sure your customer and your resident experience remains positive?
Absolutely. I think there needs to be friction. I think everybody agrees with that. And what we found is the biggest change that we did is taking that decision process completely off-site. So using a process that's called Decision Assist. And we do still have the team members that are trying to find the workarounds to get people into the apartments because they're seeing their occupancy maybe stagnating or not going where they want it to be. And it's really getting our teams out of the mindset of focusing on occupancy or physical occupancy and focusing on economic occupancy. Yeah. So we want to get the right people in place that are going to pay and are going to have longevity. And so we do find that there is some friction, and we will get the workaround requests, but we shut that down because we centralize and we make the decisions either through our software and then with oversight of corporate staff looking at it. Something else we've looked at is those conversion metrics, and really finding where are people dropping out of the process. So do we need to make changes? To your point, Dustin, is we do not want to do a broad brush approach. But at the same time, so we have assets in Texas and Nevada where fraud has been prevalent. In Arizona, we weren't seeing it as much. However, we are now seeing fraud starting to come into the Arizona market more frequently. So we also can't say, oh, we don't have an issue with fraud, so we need to stay out of that. Mm-hmm. We need to proactively be looking at that too, knowing that it is coming. Yeah. But some of the conversions that we do look at is website click to lease signing rate, the application start to lease signing rate, application completion to lease signing rate, and then the approval to lease signing rate. And you can tell a lot from where people are falling off in the process. And normally, if we're getting feedback that there's glitches with the software or there's something happening, it's normally not user error. It's normally because they are trying to commit fraud and they're trying to get a workaround. Can I just complete a paper application and go through the process? And the answer is no.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. So Kyle, what lessons from banking and fintech and other industries can we as multifamily experts and operators apply so that we can stay ahead of this increasingly sophisticated, to use Amy's terminology, that it's not Amy's, but fraud as a service? It's legitimately there.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we look at other categories, it's no secret to this industry that we are not the tip of the spear. Shocker, right? But if we look at banking, financial services, even auto, consumer lending, I'll tell you what, oil and gas is much more progressive than multifamily. Even if looking in prop tech in its totality, I think there's innovation happening on the commercial leasing front that we've yet to see in multifamily, like our flavor or vintage, if you will, of prop tech. And so as we look at banking, for example, banking's been using device auth forever. Like concept of OTP, one-time passcode, for example. Not saying that's something we should get, there's a lot of friction with one-time passcode, but triangulating IP addresses to device, and I think, Jennifer, you spoke to it earlier, doing that at the point of an ID verification during the tour, seeing where that ID is coming from, not physically, but geolocating it via IP address. Those are technologies that we're really proud to have at Snapped available, and we have great network of partners like Clear and Encode that we leverage for those types of technologies. But being able to make that common practice in multifamily, I think will get us leveled up and on par with those other categories like banking, like consumer lending, financial services.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot on the rental payment side, where we do a lot with 3DS validation and Plaid integration so that we can verify that that payment is really coming from that resource, and that it's not a fraudulent payment. But I agree with you. I think the sooner you identify a bad actor and the sooner you get them out of your community, the better. And if you never get them in your community, that's the best scenario.
Why wait till they click submit on an application if you can weed them out at tour?
Absolutely right. Kyle, what have you seen? Dustin. I did get him.
Kyle, you can answer again if you want.
I'm good, thank you.
I blame Amy. She made me think about pizza.
I think it a little different, which is I think of like how banking and fintech use like shared industry data pools. I think pushing vendors to really help us in that department and say you're across a number of clients, you're seeing a lot more things than we see, and helping us sort of share that information across through the industry for other partners, I think it could be a really big game changer for us. I look at behavioral risk scoring. Mm-hmm. I think doing that really well. What I don't like, again, I think when we have to take the guesswork element out. So I think a really strong system is one that delivers a recommendation to you. Just clear, right? It's not something that we're debating on. I think if our leasing consultants are debating the authenticity of something, I think what the system has failed them. And I think that they've eliminated that in other industries. And I think it's time that we do that as well. So if you're still doing that, I think you need to look for a vendor partner that says we're taking that process from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to a lot of the overall thread, I think, of this year's RETCON is how can you use technology to let your staff do what they should be focusing on, and having that personal relationship and building those connections with those in your community versus trying to figure out if this pay stub is really been doctored or if it's really valid, right?
Absolutely. And one last thing I want to say to that point as well is, and I think we've said it, everybody up here has said it, which is it's ever evolving, realizing how sophisticated it is. You have to be agile. Mm-hmm. Like you have to be willing. And I think from that perspective, you don't want to be locked into something because it changes so often. You don't want to be locked into something that you can't get out of quickly. Yeah. If you're an operator, like you need to be able to, evolve with the fraudsters and evolve with the technology that they are using to get in. So if you're stuck in doing the same thing, I think that's something that banking and fintech does a really good job of, is they're not committed to one thing the whole time. They evolve and change with fraudsters.
We push 7 to 10 code-based changes a week for our fraud algorithms based on the changing dynamics of the market. So if your partners aren't moving as fast as the market is, right, you're going to be suffering.
Yep, that's exactly right. And that leads us really well into our last question of the panel is really, how do you see the fraud and fraud prevention really evolving over the next 5 years? Amy, start with you.
Yeah, I think it starts with exactly what Dustin was just saying. It's being agile and having that vendor partner that is constantly keeping up. Before we move on, how do y'all know what to change? Is it coming from feedback from who's processing the applications?
Yeah, so we have a team of 60 individuals. It's called our fraud forensics. Jennifer knows us quite well. And for anyone in the audience, I probably am a broken record, but this is individuals that are constantly scouring and monitoring the dark web, TikTok, Reddit, Facebook Marketplace for these types of new threats. And then we add them to our threat lists. We push those change releases to our system, and we keep our clients at the tip of the spear. But it's a team and really the ethos of being proactive versus reactive.
And that really goes back to the earlier question of what are we learning from other industries? If you look at software viruses, same sort of technology they've been doing where they are paying attention to that and making sure that they have fixes for that virus before it hits your computer. It's the same thing with fraudsters, but of course, a lot more complex.
Our founders were multifamily operators like you find folks on the stage. And so they're like, we see this gap in the market. What do we do? What do we do? And so they actually got with our former CTO who came from Norton Antivirus. And effectively, we built antivirus for financial documents in multifamily. Yeah. So
exactly. So Dustin, so you got your name right. Where do you see us going in the next 5 years in terms of how we're monitoring and preventing fraud?
Yeah, I think I said it. I think it's already, which is cross-portfolio data collaboration, I think is huge. Again, the more data that we can have across many different operators and understanding what's happening in each of these markets more so, and it making it available to us, I think is really important in the next 5 years. So, and I think about that from a CX perspective. If we sort of can know really good people who are coming in, really qualified applicants across portfolios, I think it better serves the industry in general. So I think of that. And then I think of just tighter alignment between risk, revenue, and CX.
Yeah, absolutely. Jennifer, what are your thoughts? Where are we going in the next 5 years?
So definitely fraud is going to follow the path of least resistance, right? So that's what we've been seeing over all these years, and that's going to continue. What we're finding is offer letter fraud is becoming a bigger issue due to the inability to looking at an algorithm to verify, is this human or not? I'm sure, Kyle, your group of 60 and many other providers have people that are trying to break your system to try and figure out, can I actually find a way and a workaround? Because if they're able to do it, a fraudster would be able to do it. Somebody else I spoke to was talking about engaging with people on social media, the people that are actually trying to sell these fraud packages to clients, to try and engage with them to see how we could move the needle forward. I'm sure Snapped, you guys are doing that as well. What else? So direct employment verification too is a thing. So we're finding that some of the video components to verify somebody's identity, they're able to spoof that now. And so working on ways to be able to truly figure out what is happening. I was speaking to somebody in the hallway and they said that their CEO had spoke on a panel. Somebody in the audience recorded their voice, either in the audience or listening to a video after, and they were utilizing that to create fraud within their own organization. So sending to Dustin, it's my voice asking Dustin to transfer funds or transfer money, and you're thinking it's legit because of a voice that's been sent. And so I think it's just constantly staying ahead of it and figuring out how do we protect our companies, our data, and align with the right partners that will allow us to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can be a little frightening to think about what people can do nowadays with AI and all the technology that's out there to really try to fool us into thinking they're good when really at the end of the day they're just there to try to game the system and make and get into a community that that we really don't want them in, more or less. So. All right. Well, actually, I think we went through all those pretty quickly. We actually have a little bit of time for questions. Does anybody have any questions? We've answered all of them, right? Did we? Yes, ma'am. Do fraudsters ever actually get into the apartment and pay?
They do. they have. We've encountered fraudsters 2 and 3 years into leases, which is crazy. I would say that those are a little bit more acceptable fraudsters. They're easier to swallow, but yeah, at some point, they've stolen some identity, they've created synthetic IDs to get in, but they legitimately just wanted a place to live. So yeah, I think you run into that. It's very, I would say, rare, but you certainly do.
I think there's also a distinction too between first party and third party fraud. So first party, when I, Kyle Nelson, apply as Kyle Nelson, and I'm maybe modifying my documents using someone else's payroll. Third party, much more dangerous, right? That's like synthetic identities. I'm using Dustin's identity in place. And while I might pay, There may be instances of prostitution, human trafficking, illicit drugs, things of that nature that are happening in that apartment that they could pay their rent, but you don't want that on your community.
And that's how you find it.
I mean, right?
And that's literally how you find it, is something like that happens.
I think there's also the case where it's kind of reversed. They got into the apartment with valid documentation, but then for one reason or another, they're not able to pay their rent. And I think that's where solutions like Zego kind of help come into play, with offering them different ways to pay their rent, whether it's flexible payments, where they can then break that rent payment up into multiple sources, multiple times, whether they can do a credit card, whether they can pay, in different sources, even with a cash pay solution. So having those kind of options also helps prevent a good tenant from turning into a bad actor, right? Because at the end of the day, when you lose your home, it has a significant impact on you as an individual. So I think it kind of plays into both of those avenues for us.
I think that was a really good plug, Jenna.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I had to get one in there, just one in there. Yes, sir. What about international applicants? Kyle, that's a great one for you. How do we handle?
Got a good solution for this one.
Yeah.
We see international applicants all the time. We verify international identity. We look at international bank statements, things of that nature. I don't think there's any correlation to increased fraud internationally versus domestic. We would encourage all of our partners in communities that utilize SNAP to accept international documents. We verify IDs from over 200 countries across the globe, 4,600 unique IDs. So we're still triangulating IP address. We're determining if that UK ID is actually coming from Kazakhstan or otherwise. And so there's the same level of fidelity as there is someone stateside that's coming to you internationally, but we do not see an increase proportionally in fraudulent activity across that international applicant pool.
Very well said.
Yeah, great question, and also great plug.
And there's some great solutions out there too, from a security deposit perspective. If they need a guarantor, or if they're not getting fully approved, conditionally approved, there's some great solutions out there to provide you a little more, so you have less risk with those applicants too.
I like bonds.
Yeah, good job. Any other questions? No? Yes, ma'am. So if you get a fraudster in your community, how do you get them out? I'm going to look to the owner. I'm going to look to our three panelists here that work in the industry. Amy?
I would want my legal team here, but I think we would probably look towards eviction proceedings and what rights we have to get our possessions back, since there was fraud present.
Yeah. Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same process as if they just weren't paying. I mean, it's essentially the eviction process. You go through the standard, whatever local laws that you have in terms of that. Normally, we don't get, you would think that, I think it's hard to actually prove and prosecute from a police perspective fraudsters, which is why it's so prevalent. I think partly also is because the repercussions are a bit different, right? It's not like I'm going to jail. It's mostly like I'm going to get kicked out. So that being the repercussion, I think is more attractive to continue to try to be fraudulent. And certain states and certain counties, it takes forever to get people out. So they know they can live there for a long time. Sorry, Jennifer.
No, and I was going to say that they certainly gravitate towards the areas where it takes longer for eviction proceedings. That's why in Arizona we didn't have as much of a fraud problem, because sometimes within the calendar month you can get somebody out for non-payment of rent. Somebody I was chatting with too said that there are provisions now, I believe, in Georgia and Florida, and Kyle, you may know more about this, around fraud and actually prosecuting. So I think that there might be something there with Georgia and Florida, and more states may potentially follow, because they are seeing an uptick in fraud that's happening.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. It depends so much on the geographical location, which is why the NAA survey really showed that, a bad actor can cost you $100K. In potential income, and in most cases, it's not even worth prosecuting, because the cost of the legal fees may outweigh what you've lost in rent.
And turn costs on top of
Yes.
it too. So we're finding that some of these apartments are left completely trashed. So you may have had a renovated unit that you spent $15,000 on. They've trashed the unit, so you now have to turn it and get it back to its original condition, beyond all the lost rent that you've experienced as well.
That's a really, really good point. All right. Any other questions? Anything that you all wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to?
Well, I was going to say one thing, which is, and the hard thing about fraud versus the bad debt that may happen from somebody legitimately losing their job is it's harder to entice them with things like cash for keys or things that we used to do those tactics to get people out sooner, right? We didn't have to file the eviction process, but with fraudulent people, that tactic works a lot less. So I think it's all the more reason it's so important to treat it as a frontline problem instead of a collections and eviction problem.
Yeah, it's that whole proactive versus reactive response. Yeah. Amy, anything else you want to add?
I don't.
No? Okay. This was her first panel. Didn't she do a great job?
She did amazing.
Thank y'all.
She did. All right. Anything from you, Jennifer?
I had a few stats if we have a little bit of time that we pulled from our portfolio. So going back to speed of approving applicants and getting things through, we found that our approval to move-in rate has exceeded 93%. So we've really been able to move people along. Again, the question's how to be thorough but fast, because you don't want that friction to impact your occupancy. And then we've also been looking at our conversion funnels for identity verification. We have only 2% of applicants who are unable to complete identity verification. And then with income verification, it's less than 5%, which can otherwise be incredibly high friction. So we've been able to minimize that. And again, taking the on-site teams out of that process, we've been able to get some really good results.
Yeah, that's
Nice.
great. Dustin?
Yeah, last thing I would say, if you're an operator looking for vendor partners for this process for you, I think it's important, and I think Kyle would agree, to strategically look for partnerships and not just buying software. In this touch point specifically, it's really important. And I think it's important to share sort of KPI ownership. The things that she's talking about, I think is really important that you share those KPIs with your vendor partner and that they sort of co-own those things with you. I think that's really important as well. So the feedback loops, the true partnership with this touch point is, I mean, obviously you want software that you want to partner with partnerships that are actual partnerships in most touch points, but I think it's so important in the application phase.
And
Yeah,
I'd
I
love
to-
to piggyback too on that comment. So the setup of this fraud partner that you're going to have, it should be a bit painful. It should take a lot of time. It should be asking a lot of difficult questions. You should be having to provide a lot of data that's going to drive a lot of people on your teams crazy. We've gone through with 2 separate partners, and it's a bit of a painful process, but there's a benefit to it. So don't think that you're going to be signing an advertising contract and your ad's going to be up tomorrow and a vendor partner that's going to come to you and say, you don't really need to be involved in this. We're going to take care of everything. That is not the case when you're setting up new applicant screening, fraud detection, et cetera.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is, don't be afraid to ask them to take a look at some of the existing applications that have already been approved and what fraud they can detect from your data, right? So give them some of your data. Give them that opportunity to prove to you that they can reduce the fraud instances that you have, and see what the results are. And I think that goes back to picking a good horse, right? And making sure that who you're picking and who you're partnering with does have that strong partner relationship, to what Dustin said, and is someone that you can work with and share a vision with.
Yeah, I think there's like 700 vendor partners on the show floor or something. It's like a throw up of just every supplier under the sun. And I've been solving this fraud problem for the last decade at 2 different companies. And I think, been with Snap for 4 or 5 now. And I think what separates the fraud detection category from a lot of others is it has quantifiable red and black ROI. It's very
Absolutely.
easy to cut through the noise. And we do that every day, is show ROI to our customers. And if we're not performing, then fire us. So we renew our business every month with our customers, right? And historically, we operated a business on month-to-month contracts because we love that opportunity to show continuous impact.
It's awesome.
And I think that's much different than many other service categories in terms of being able to see as an operator the ROI associated to this product.
Yeah, you're absolutely totally right.
And I think it ties back to your applicant screening too, from the very get-go. And when you think about, we've been doing the same thing for as long as I've been in the industry, right? Your income needs to be 3 times, or the ability to pay your rent. We just keep doing the same thing, but we need to really question the status quo and look at things differently and find partners that are going to ask the difficult questions in order to protect us better.
Yeah, totally agree. All right. Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate each of you and your conversation. I think this was a very educational conversation for everyone. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your conference and enjoy your lunch.